kind of we wanted to talk about the desirability of a product, kind of what makes it look good, what draws people to it. We wanted to talk a little bit about the feasibility, basically how do we get it made, what goes into that, a little bit about the viability or the business end, and then, of course, we want to get into a little bit of the sustainability of those products and where they go from there. So I'll let Andrea take it from here.
Great. Hold the clicker. All right, great. So I am excited to talk to you about what makes a product desirable. So how do you make a product desirable? Well, the first question that comes to my mind is desirable for who? Humans. We want to make it desirable for humans. And here's some images of humans. They're all climbers, portraits of climbers. If you'll notice, they're different genders, they're different ages, they like different colors. So how can we aim our product at a broad swath of humans? Luckily, humans have needs and wants. So humans gravitate toward things that ensure our survival and give us pleasure, and we avoid the problems of pain and discomfort. And I put together a number of human needs here that I want to share. Of course, there's a lot of them, but I chose ones that are specific to the outdoor industry and what we can provide to make something desirable for our customers. So the first one is security and safety. Here's an example of like Allstate Insurance. They have created like security as synonymous with their brand. And an example in the outdoor industry is this helmet and these goggles. It can protect your head, your eyes. Think of climbing gear. Everything within that provides security and bodily safety for the person doing the climbing. The next thing we want is comfort, and we want to feel good. I mean, look at this woman taking a bath in chocolate. Like, she's feeling good. This is desirable. An example from the industry is this Sherpa fleece. It looks very cozy, very warm. It would feel so wonderful against your skin, and you know you'd be warm in it. To be accepted, we want to be accepted. And one really great example, I think, is the Power of She campaign from Athleta. I noticed about 5 months ago that I get their catalogs, and all of a sudden I started noticing there were older women in there, and younger women, and women of color, and larger women, and they stopped airbrushing their swimsuit models. And I saw this and I was like, wow, they're accepting women as they are, and they are tying this in with their brand and their product. So I was really impressed with this. The next one is to be desired. We all want to be desired. We want to attract a mate. There's a lot of pleasure in that. Also, it ensures the survival of the species. So the perfume industry, like the beauty industry and fashion industry, really ties into this need. And I think that the outdoor industry can do more here. Another one is to grow and become more. I think Nike really owns this. It's synonymous with their brand. Like, just do it. Do something more than you thought possible. I think in the outdoor industry, we're all about that. Climbing mountains. Well, there's so many things that we do to prove that we can become better. To give back. This is another one that's really good for the outdoor industry. Here's an example of Newman's Own. You know, you can have this nice salad dressing, but you know that all of their profits are going to charity, and that makes you feel good. Another example in the industry is 10 Tree. You can buy a t-shirt and 10 trees can be planted. That makes us feel really good. Okay, so now we know a few needs and wants that humans have. Well, how can we make our products speak to those needs and wants? How do we communicate that? Well, we can give them an aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is a pleasant or satisfying experience that arises from the meaning and emotions that are applied to an object. So here's a car, and it can get you from point A to point B, but that's not all this car does. There's something inherent in how this car looks that makes us feel a certain way, and it is addressing certain needs and desires that we have just through looking at it. So a little bit of history. In the 1730s, Alexander Baumgarten coined the terms aesthetics, and he developed the concept of taste. basically where you judge the beauty in an object with your senses. So sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. These are the things we use to see if something is desirable. And beauty arises when qualities like color, form, and shape are combined in a way that please our aesthetic senses and our intellect. So I want to tell you a little bit about the elements and principles of design. These are the building blocks of aesthetic experience. You can combine these in millions of different ways to convey the experience that you want to your customer. So a few of the elements are color, texture, line, shape, and a few of the principles are balance, rhythm, proportion, similarity, and contrast. And I'll just have a couple examples so you know what I'm talking about here. So color, this speaks to us. Blue is a color that is very serene, it's very calm. I mean, think of a blue sky or a deep blue sea. You just automatically feel calm from these associations. It communicates trustworthiness, and it's an intellectual color. So by putting this in a product, you can convey these feelings. With yellow, it's a very intense color. It's the color of the sun. It's creative, and it gives us the feeling of being fully awake, like coffee. And with textures, coarse textures can make us feel natural and unrefined, and a shiny one can be aloof, exciting. A heavy fabric can communicate durability and strength. And a translucent fabric can be fragile or delicate. So those were a couple of the elements, and I want to talk about a few principles. So rhythm is a principle, and that's when you look at a garment, it's how your eye travels over the garment. It's like the first thing you look at, and then how your eye goes across it. And as a designer, you can guide someone's eye across the garment. So here's a really good example. This is a North Face jacket. My eye goes directly to the center front collar, comes down here in a line. As soon as I see these pockets, or the zippered pockets, the angled ones, my eye jumps over to the other side and the other two zippers. So I'm being guided across this garment. Another thing our eye as humans really loves is balance. We love symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. And this is a great example of asymmetrical balance, with the two zippers on one side and the two on another. And if even one of these zippers were gone, we would be so irritated with this garment. We'd be like, there's something off about it. So balance is something we really love. Okay, so now we know a little bit about aesthetics, about beauty, about wants and needs. Is that all that will make a garment desirable? No, we need function. I love this. I wanted to share it with you because, it's called The Uncomfortable by architect Canerina Camprani. And she designed some just average household goods that are aesthetically beautiful, right? But they're absolutely non-functional. And I love it when I look at this, I just go like, ugh, like there's something so wrong about it. So I wanted to give you guys that feeling too. So the colors are beautiful, the lines are beautiful, but absolutely non-functional. You could definitely meet your needs eating with this fork, but yeah, so bad. So I think the outdoor industry really crushes it on making functional products, but I think we can do more by adding more desirability, more wants and needs being met. So I have a couple examples. So here are a pair of hiking pants, and they're very functional. These are women's hiking pants. I'm sure you probably didn't know that. They keep this woman comfortable and dry, I'm sure, but there's really a lack of desirability here. So here's another pair of pants from Prana, actually. These are the Halley pants. They're made out of a nylon fabric, but they're much more versatile. You could go on the trail in these pants, and then you could go to the bar, and you could actually look cute. Of all my climber friends, everybody has a pair of those Halley pants because they make your butt look good. And that's huge. They are at the top of the list on NPD data. They really do well. And of course, with Amazon, there's like 1,000 4.5-star reviews. And you can see the detail, even with the stitching, it's communicating durability, where they've placed the pockets, and even the texture on the snaps, it's saying something. It's giving us an experience and making us feel desirable as women. Here's the men's version. Of course, this is the Stretch Zion. I'm sure a number of you have heard of that. Top of the list on the NPD data. And oops. Here's some of the extra details that have been added in that just communicate with us to make it feel rugged, masculine, desirable. So what I want to give you today is really to make your products desirable, really focus on your customer and how many of their desires could you meet. So as a quick summary, what makes a good product design? First of all, it solves a problem by addressing a need or a want. And the more needs and wants you can address in one product, the more desirable it will be. Number two, it thoughtfully incorporates the elements and principles of design and functionality. All of those things need to be present. And number three, it provides an aesthetic experience. It communicates a mood or feel that goes beyond the design itself. So hopefully this has been helpful for you, and I will pass it on for the feasibility to Andrew.
All right, so our next big challenge is after we've designed this aesthetically desirable product, our next challenge becomes how do we get that product made? And so it really depends on the technology that we've got and our manufacturing capability. And so, sorry, you're really gonna hold this to your mouth. So basically you gotta determine what technology is gonna be required and what manufacturing. So I've got a very high-tech piece of technology that we store at Utah State that I'm gonna show you here. So I'll let you ponder that for a second, but this slide should clear it up. So as an example, spider silk. Everyone talks about it as the new wave of material, stronger than steel, going to replace all our climbing ropes. It can be used in all of our clothing, indestructible stuff. So what's the problem with getting spider silk? Well, domesticating spiders is really hard. I don't know if you've ever had pet spiders, but they don't really spin silk for you like you want. Our next problem is at Utah State, we have a researcher who's embedded the spider gene into a goat. And so through the goat's milk, you can extract spider silk. And as fun as it is to milk goats all the time, you get very little spider silk. And so the yields are just too low to make it very viable, but we're able to use it for a lot of testing. And then now it's, well, can we put it in silkworms? And so now the next generation is silkworms have much higher yields, so you're getting spider silk coming from silkworms. And if that's not enough, we also now are deriving it through tobacco leaves. It's actually coming out of, I believe, South Carolina University. And we've got our first field of test alfalfa that has spider silk proteins integrated into the alfalfa. So then you can cut it, and the idea is that we can finally get the yields high enough to make this more viable for the products. And so when we start talking about it, is it the design is driving the technology, or is the technology drive the design? Do we just say, well, we've got this tech, so I'm going to design around this tech? Or do we say, I've got this cool design, but this tech doesn't exist? Are we going to push that envelope? And so I always like to look at these old popular science magazines of what they thought was high tech back in the day, stuff that couldn't be built or didn't exist. And so they probably thought, yeah, man, this ice motorcycle thing would be sweet if we could just make it. And then now today you can see we've got the accessories you can add onto your dirt bike to transform it. Well, that kind of becomes a big driving point is, are we going to pursue this because we do have to develop that technology? And so we also get the joys of a lot of technology disruptions. And so 3D printing, additive manufacturing has become one of those where it's changing the way we design, the way we think about design, automation in the workplace, and then even here on the right where you now don't have to try on clothes, you can just walk up to the magic mirror, select what's in the store, it overlays it on you so you can quickly determine if you're going to want to change a million times and see if you like the way it fits or the way it looks. And so, and then by the way you do that, the companies can gather market research as to what people are most interested in, what they're trying on the most. So it kind of helps push that envelope. And so sometimes it's a lot easier if you just take technology that exists. You can still make innovative products. So this right here, this baby incubator, they've got a huge problem in third world countries keeping babies warm. And so a lot of them will actually die just due to being not able to maintain their body temperature. It disrupts their heart, their brain. And so a bunch of students at Stanford determined how do we do this without power? There's no power in these villages. How are we going to do it? And so they ended up coming up with a solution of basically just a nice insulated blanket, but they use a paraffin wax that they found the perfect transition between liquid to solid that maintains at 98 degrees. And so the villagers can boil this big bag in water. It melts the wax inside. They lay it inside, and then it keeps the baby at 98 degrees for 4 hours, in which case they reboil the water, and it's had a huge drastic impact. And so that's a good idea of where it was a feasible product. It just used technology we already had, but it's a very innovative product, and they didn't have to push the technology envelope. Sometimes we can get away with this. Sometimes we need to push it. And then also if our manufacturing already exists, it also helps because we can just send it right on. Sometimes we have to come up with new manufacturing technologies. So if you look at the mountain bikes here, I've got the Repack 2, which is one of our first mountain bikes developed in the Bay Area, California. And so they had no technology, they had no manufacturing specific to mountain bikes, so they would go to the old junkyards and grab these paper route bikes, harvest them, and make mountain bikes that were more rugged. And then today we can see that because that took off, we've had a lot more technology pumped in. We take carbon fiber from the aerospace, find new ways to weave it, and then we implement that technology into an outdoor product. And so it's a great way to go from there. And then manufacturing processes, again, just help push it. If you look at a lot of older products from the 50s and 60s, everything's square or perfectly circular, because the machining equipment they had back then was all manually driven, and that's what you got, circles and squares, or maybe a rectangle. With the advent of computers and CNC machinery, it completely changed the way a designer could design, because now they can have curves, they can have ovals. It's not like, I mean, imagine trying to draw something on an Etch-a-Sketch that's not a circle or not a square. I mean, I know we've all seen it on YouTube where they're perfect arcs, but that's what it was like for a manual machinist. CNC, you can see we can get all kinds of interesting. So the improvements in manufacturing processes also therefore make the improvements in our design. A robotic arm grabbing a garment and sewing it. And so the idea is, how are we pushing the technology to improve our manufacturing of our textiles as it becomes more and more labor intensive, so there's a lot of research being done there. And so in the video you can see this robot grab the shirt, bring it to a sewing machine, sew it. But part of the technology I want to show was not necessarily that they're showing the garment, it was actually that robotic arm. With the cost of automation coming way down, those robotic arms, especially that brand that I had the picture of, have been implemented everywhere. To now they've demonstrated that they can bring it out of a closet, set it in the cockpit, and it will fly the airplane. So if the pilot ever went down, the stewardess grabs the robot and sets it in front of it, plugs it in, and it flies the airplane. But the other aspect too is, for a small time manufacturer that might have a hard time trying to keep employees in because the jobs are monotonous or boring, it allows them to bring that in and allow it to do a certain job, then they can reset it up very quickly to do another job. I had a colleague back in Minnesota that just made these little hooks, took one little tack weld, and he said he'd hire a welder, and 2 weeks later they'd quit, because a welder doesn't want to just tack weld all day long. They want to weld and do crazy things. So he even tried paying the guy $50 an hour to see if they would stay longer than 2 weeks. He made it 3. And so he said, no, he just went and got a robot arm, put the gun in the robot's hand, and it did it all day long, never took a break, it didn't complain, didn't want vacation, his dog didn't get sick. And so it's technology like that I think we're going to start seeing a huge disruption into the manufacturing stream that'll help either bring product back or help smaller companies be more versatile with what they can do. And so it's really, the feasibility of a product really comes into play as we go forward.
Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit different look at this. First of all, I just want to say, I had wonderful professors in my university experience, but how would it be to have these guys as your professor to learn the outdoor product design and development, right? I think this is pretty cool. So thank you for sharing that, and really look up to these people. One thing that I'm going to start looking at a little bit more in mind is if you have the aesthetics and the materials, the technology, and the manufacturing, how do you then create a viable, sellable product? And what needs to take place to make that happen? I'm going to share a little bit of some personal experiences, and then I'm going to share a little bit a deeper dive into a couple very successful brands that have found unique ways to communicate that to the industry and to the public and to the end consumer, and ultimately are very successful. So, product is king, of course. We know that product wins. But what do you do after you have that unique and differentiated product? Okay? There's multiple ways to look at it. So, from personal experience, having founded a brand, for those of you who have followed Ultra, you know that we were not based on aesthetics out of the gate. Okay, we were function first, and that's where we started. Okay, so we had a clear, differentiated product, and although I'm using myself as an example and other brands as examples, we almost looked at it as being different for different sake. If the other brands were doing X, we did Y, okay? And that's how we were able to clearly differentiate from the fit of our shoes to the design to everything we did. We almost did it to be different. And that differentiation, that uniqueness was able to make us successful. NPD did a questionnaire to millennials if they could describe themselves in one word. Okay, and what word was it? Unique. Okay, and that's what people want in today's culture, in today's consumer, is they want something that is unique. And it needs to be function first, it needs to be based, but they like unique. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do as a brand to make us successful. In a mere 7 years, we've been able to grow that ways. Now, there's other ways to do it, right? Your product is king. It has to be unique, but how else can you do it? One brand that I've really looked up to and how they've done it is a brand called Cotopaxi. If you're not familiar with them, they're absolutely amazing in what they do. I really look up to it. This is one of their most popular backpacks, and if you look at the materials that they used, how many colors is in that one pack? Okay, and the crazy thing, if you go to their website, this backpack comes in 42 different options. Okay, so what makes Cotopaxi unique is this unique, differentiated product that speaks to the consumer, and yet they have a secondary approach, which is social, tackling social issues, right? What they do, they create innovative products and experiences, but they fund sustained poverty, okay? And this goes across everything they do, okay? It relates specifically back to their product, which, due to the various material usage, right, you'd think, man, there's gonna be a lot of scrapped material there. Well, guess what? With that size, they're able to not minimize the amount of scrap that takes place, which is sustaining. Right? And they're able to help, and they're able to translate, right? Their impact report, that transparency that they've created is powerful. It's amazing. People demand that in today's culture and in today's society, from social media just to the social issues that are taking place. That transparency is mandatory in what you do to be successful. Another brand that's really kind of pioneered this similar approach has gone more of an environmental story. Patagonia has remained relevant, which is impressive. If you look at other brands, I mean, I remember when Airwalk was awesome, right? When I was a kid, it was like Airwalks were the coolest. I haven't seen an Airwalk in 10 years, but I see Vans everywhere, right? Patagonia has been able to do something similar, but if you go to their website now, they've been able to evolve their strategy from just having awesome and unique and differentiated product to now going to an environmental stance. and it correlates, again, directly with their product. You go to their website, and out of the 4 screens that pop up, 3 of them have nothing to do with product, right? They have to do with an environmental, social issues, from saving dams to cleaner oceans to rainforests. And yet their product, again, then goes there, where they're using recycled materials, and they're able to really be at the forefront of transparency from their down production and so forth. And so as we start looking at product, obviously being unique is you have to be unique in today's culture. You have to be differentiated, but at the same time, you can tie that in other ways to spin it to your end consumer. Everything must tie, or else you see through it, right? People see through that nowadays. And the brands that are successful from a product standpoint will have a secondary backing, whether it's being differentiated biomechanically like Ultra, whether it's social injustice, or whether it's environmental concerns. These are the type of things that customers are going to look for, and this is ultimately what makes brands and products feasible in today's culture and consumer. So, thank you.
Yeah, so I think we're living in interesting times, and we're living in a really interesting industry, because all of us, whether we're manufacturers or retailers or any part of that value chain, we're making things and we're selling things, but we're also most of us are in love with the outdoors and doing things in the outdoors. So I'm going to talk about how we need to think about kind of that dichotomy, and how do we, as both lovers of the outdoors, but also people who are in business to sell things, how can we reconcile those things, and what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we're designing products from the beginning to help make sure that at the end of their life that they're not destroying the environment. So there's this concept now called the circular economy. And really what that is it is kind of the antithesis to where we have been. And where we have been has been in this kind of this model here in the past, which is basically we make something, we use something, and we discard it. Unfortunately, that system creates some really harmful both environmental and social practices. So, in the case of an apparel item, you're producing a fiber. So, in that fiber production traditionally, especially if it's a synthetic fiber, you are creating environmental stresses. You're either pulling oil out of the ground, or you're creating energy issues, greenhouse gas emissions. In clothing production, again, all of us who are involved and understand about the apparel industry knows that we're really looked at as one of the biggest violators of environmental principles that you can find now, whether it's, again, the energy that goes into making some of the fibers, or the water that's used to grow cotton, the dyes, the waste stream. So we don't really have a great, environmental footprint. Again, when you're using things, most of us as consumers, we're wearing something and then we're washing it right away. And a lot of people don't think about the fact that, can I wear something 3 or 4 times before I wash it and use all that water and use all that energy? And then at the end of life, what's happening to these textiles again, or the equipment that I'm using? The statistic in North America is that we as Americans and consumers are throwing away, I think it's 80 pounds of textiles a year into the landfill. And that stuff doesn't easily go away. Unfortunately, we're living in an environment globally that this is becoming more and more prevalent, as is this. None of us want to be, outside and enjoying the environment and living in that kind of reality. But again, more and more pockets of the world where you wouldn't think that, trash and pollution are necessarily showing up, they are. This is from a recent National Geographic article about microplastics and about ocean pollution. So really, when you talk about circular economy and what that means, it basically takes design into account at every step of the way. So it's designing things to avoid harmful substances and pollution. It's designing things at the beginning, thinking about how they're going to be used. Are they durable? Are they reusable? At the end of its life, can I recycle it or can it be degraded? And then designing it and thinking about, can I substitute that synthetic? Can I use a natural resource or something that is a renewable resource? And so again, this is the model that I think we in this industry, but many of the consumer products industries that I work with are moving towards, and we call it, again, it's a circular economy, and it's basically saying, from the beginning, thinking about how we use things all the way through a product's life. So what this really requires, though, it really requires collaboration across the value chain. So it's people like our colleagues at Utah State and the students there learning about design principles, but thinking about how that design at the beginning is going to impact the product, the environment, the use all the way through. It's us as manufacturers being smart about things from the beginning and making sure we're not using harmful substances and that we are creating things that can be recycled and degrade. It's it's people in the brands saying, do you have a take-back program? Are you enabling your consumers to send things back to you so that they can have a life beyond a landfill? So I just have a couple examples of some companies that I think are doing some really cool things from a circular standpoint. This is a company actually down in Brazil, and it's a really small company. I think they have something like 30 employees, but they make all of their apparel items from leftover fabrics. So again, those of you who are close to the apparel industry know that when you get a lot of hanger samples. So the mills come to you and they give you all these samples. What happens to those samples? They get thrown away. Or when you're in just even cutting and sewing, though there's lots and lots of waste that happens. So this is a company that takes those types of materials and makes it into apparel items. They have an open source design, they have lean inventory, non-toxic cleaning, and then they're also, like many brands that we see now, they'll take any of their garments back and repair them, or they'll send them for recycling. This is another company. I have to stand out here so I can look at it better. This is another apparel company that is doing some really cool stuff in leather jackets. And so you think, leather, well, how can you really, how do you recycle that, or how is that sustainable? But you can. These jackets are made from recyclable materials. And the cool thing about this is that it's not necessarily a sell program. What they do is they do a lease program. So you can rent these jackets for 2 months, 5 months, 8 months with an option to buy. But really what it's trying to do is push back on this fast fashion movement, this movement where I buy a dress and I wear it for 6 months and then it's out of fashion and I throw it away, and again, it's sitting in the landfill for 200 years. What they're saying is, look, when you're done with it, instead of throwing it away or not having a useful life for it, we'll take it back, we'll refurbish it, and somebody else can use it. And this is, I think this company is really cool. It's doing things from the beginning of life instead of the end of life. It's looking and saying, well, what can we do and how can we make things? They do things for surfboards. They do things for houses, actually, and they're making insulation and these materials out of mushroom compost, basically. Something that's really renewable, that's not super intensive on the land, that doesn't require a lot of pesticides or water. And they're saying, how can we take materials that traditionally are not environmentally friendly and put that practice into design? So those are just some examples of some really cool things, and we're fortunate. We're part of a foundation called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's doing a lot of things around circular economy. So if it's something that you're interested in, I would say go to their website and you can learn lots more about that. So.
All right, well, I guess we've got a little bit of time for some questions. So, does anyone have any?
For people who have a product idea but don't necessarily have a design background, do you think it makes more sense for them to try to learn as they go to develop a product, or do you think it makes more sense for them to go to a design company who has the experience and maybe has experience with different avenues that we might have to go down to get a product to market?
Enroll at Utah State.
I'm a Colorado State University graduate. That might not happen, but I do respect that program.
So there's a couple different avenues you can take. So when I was teaching at a different university, I set up a design center there. And so a lot of universities kind of have these in-house design centers, looking for people in the community that have ideas that just don't know where to go. Because a lot of the time you go to those professional design companies and you're out 40 grand right up front just to get something out. And so you can allow the students to work on it and things like that is a good route. Some people are just natural tinkerers, and so you can kind of work your way through it. YouTube has become very helpful in helping you understand different tools, lynda.com, those types of things to kind of educate yourself. Brian kind of has a background in it. How did you kind of go?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's just passion. Initially our concepts, we worked retail. I mean, I worked at a ski shop. I was a ski bum, and we had these ideas that we had, and we tried to give it to other brands for free. Literally, we're like, we work retail. We just want you to make this type of product, and we literally got laughed out of some of the booths here at Outdoor Retailer 10 years ago. And so after about a year of experimenting and tinkering and all that, we're like, and we didn't feel the industry or shoe designers were listening to that. And so we decided to start our own shoe brand. That's literally how it came up. We were working retail. We didn't want to start a company. And it just happened. There's certain, we were lucky and found a design firm that does advanced prototyping, and you can find those. There's quite a few of them in both apparel, accessories, footwear, and we went and talked to them and say, hey, what would it cost? We started building a business plan, and all of a sudden we had a shoe company and got investors, and now, we just sold the VF, the VF company 6 weeks ago, and a part of that family now, and doing, a lot of revenue, and just really being able to believe in those designs. As passionate as we were able to build a whole brand out of just an idea and just passion and grit.
I would also say, I'm sure you have a lot of people here. There's people in all kinds of different backgrounds. Collaborating on a passion project could be a really great thing. Maybe there's somebody who's in design who's like, oh, you have a great idea. I would love to work with you. Let's see where we can go from this. So I really suggest tapping into all the amazing people that and see what you can collaborate, how you can collaborate with them. And I think something magical can come out of that.
All right, we got any other questions?
As the entrepreneur, the owner of a new business just getting started, do you have any tips about, from the social initiative perspective, how young companies can start doing something like that with limited resources and limited money, limited people? How do you get started, with any social cause? Just how do you begin that process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't work for a small company, but I work with a lot of small companies. But I would say from the perspective, I think you as a company, I think you have to find the thing that fits best with you, the things that make you passionate, that turn you on, that make you get up and be excited about them. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be authentic, and that's going to come through. And also, with a mind towards what you care about, what your employees care about, but also what your target audience really cares about as well.
Yeah, it has to tie with whatever that product is. And I think that in the industry now, with our factories, we don't market this, but we just tell our factories that, hey, we want to see every single option you can, and you just make that a priority, not necessarily from a marketing standpoint because it's the right thing to do. And there's other things. My brother-in-law started a very successful belt company, he called it the Mission Belt, but he actually lived in a third world country for a while, and so he started the company because he had a great idea, but his mission is to is cause-based, and so $1 from every belt goes to third world agricultural loans. Now the belt doesn't have anything to do with that cause, but he personally has that tie-in, and it makes sense to that end consumer that, hey, I had a great idea, but I also lived in these third world countries, and I don't want to just give them money. I actually want to give them a hand up. And so it's a third world agricultural loan. You can look into it. He has on his website the dollar amount that he's given over the last 5 years, and it makes sense. And so I think you have to find a purpose that you can attach to personally, and if you don't, I think people kind of see through it that, oh, well, that's just, Ultra doesn't have that story, but we use the recycled stuff, but we don't market it because we're just not there yet, And so other brands, you have to have that personal attention, and it was fun helping my brother-in-law get that company started and watching his passion and purpose and being able to tie that into a brand. It's really cool.
Do you have anything? Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is I've been working with my brother, starting up a clothing line for tall, slim guys. Because we were all sitting, I'm the shortest of my family at 6'4". I got 4 brothers, they're all 6'6", 6'5", 6'7". And the idea was, t-shirts don't fit us. We're either kind of the Britney Spears look or, the poncho look, and it wasn't working for us. And so the idea was getting passionate about, and so my brother really took off with him. I helped line up some manufacturing for him, and so he's taken it, and we kind of play on this very fun, humorous side, all the tall jokes as part of the marketing campaigns and things. But it's all about getting into the social medias and then tapping into those people that have that same issue. And the first thing that happens is they order one, and then 2 weeks later we'll get an order for like 15 shirts or hoodies or whatever it is, because they're like, they actually fit. Like, I can lift my arms up and my belly's not hanging out. And so it's really trying to build, for us it's just been building the brand around kind of having fun with it, but meeting those same needs that that we've always tried to meet for ourselves in our customer. But so we got a couple more questions, or good to go? All right. Well, we'd like to say thanks for having us out, and